Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video I'm going to be breaking down, writing out the Florida 70.3 or the build up to Florida 70.3. Ultimately this training plan is actually building towards Ironman Lake Placid, but the next 6 to 8 weeks, I'm basically calling this the resilience project, focusing on the things that I think are important, but ultimately decreasing the intensity and focusing more on becoming a more resilient overall athlete, because I have so many races this year that I can't really afford to, have those big obstacles like injury, burnout, fatigue, illness. Trying to mitigate that as much as possible. With that being said, Wednesdays and Tuesdays are going to be the long rides, 4 hours, aerobic endurance, where primarily I'm focusing on power to heart rate ratio, trying to increase power while keeping heart rate the same and monitoring that relationship over a long period of time. Sundays are going to be the long runs. Again, the two things that I'm focusing on are the aerobic endurance on the bike and the muscular endurance on the long run. So trying to get an hour and a half to 2 hours of hills pretty much every weekend. Some weekends a little bit more, some weekends a little bit less than 2 hours, but again, primarily focused on hills. That is going to be the big thing to build up that muscular endurance, and not necessarily just always doing it on a soft surface and then coming back a little bit later in the day and doing a short shakeout run. Really important to help kind of keep the ball rolling, get to Monday and feel still really good, accelerating the rate of recovery. Then with that said, those are the two kind of most important ones. And then next important is probably the hard bike on Friday, getting some high intensity in, probably around 90 minutes with 30-ish minutes of hard work, focusing on threshold, focusing on VO2 max, just short, sweet, small dose of intensity, getting that in so that I can boost FTP without necessarily focusing on it overall, because one of the ways that we burn out the most is by doing too much high intensity. That can really lead to a lot of fatigue, and so again, trying to increase it in small doses. From there, Tuesday, strength ride, where I'm focusing on low cadence intervals and high cadence intervals, and kind of comparing and contrasting, or not comparing, contrasting the two, where I have long low cadence reps. But when you do that, it builds strength, but it also can kind of pull down your natural cadence, which isn't necessarily good, it's not necessarily bad, but I want to contrast that with high cadence, short neuromuscular power reps of max 30 seconds, where I'm going basically as hard as I can and kind of building strength in both those ways, with the low, slow stuff, and then with the high, fast, hard stuff. Then after that, Mondays and Thursdays, probably the next highest priority is doing the strength and mobility work. Like I found out in my form analysis that the strength and the mobility are absolutely key, absolutely essential, especially with how much biking there is in triathlon, to help increase that hip flexor range of motion, quad range of motion, so that I can fully utilize my full running form. That's going to be really important going forward. And after that, it's pretty much filler the rest of the week of trying to get as much running in as I can, with the freedom and flexibility to switch runs for rides. Aerobic hour of running on Mondays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, those might become bike rides, and that's okay if that happens. Trying to monitor the training stress, the impact that my musculoskeletal system has taken on, and seeing, what is the best step for me to do today. Because as much as I believe in the training plan that I wrote, I also know that there is no perfect training plan, and so what's important is the execution of understanding where you want to go and understanding what your body needs, and those two things might indicate that you need to make some small adjustments along the way. So some short shakeout runs after the harder stuff to try to, again, increase that rate of recovery and just get a little extra miles in. making sure that training stimulus is constantly firing. And the one thing that I haven't talked about yet is doing the Vasa training. So again, I'm not swimming, which is kind of a risk, but I'm not swimming. So Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, getting in half an hour of Vasa training, ideally before I run and before I do strength, but if I have to do it after, I have to do it after, just depending on the schedule, flexibility, but making sure that I'm having at least half an hour of Vasa training in, and doing it especially around the strength training sessions where I'm working a lot on shoulder strength will be really, really helpful, I think, going forward. So that basically kind of is the training plan. There's some small adjustments with days that I am traveling, etc. But this is pretty much at least the first week of the 2-week blocks that I'm doing. But ultimately, this is like 17 and a half hours of training. And I think that is really doable, especially with leading into the next week. So in the next week of training, basically everything stays the same except for Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. On Tuesday, we shift the long ride to Tuesday, and we include some high intensity intervals at the end of it. So those will be 30 seconds on, 30 seconds on, or 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off for 10-minute segments with some tempo at the end to really just get that Ironman, end of Ironman feeling. Friday is going to be kind of interesting because I only have one Friday due to the travel that I have where I'm going to be following this block. So I'm going to do a 5K time trial. I'm going to see if I can break 15 minutes and kind of test out the run slow to run fast theory, which means Wednesday is just going to be an aerobic recovery day where I'm getting in another hour run or so and just kind of getting used to and just kind of padding an extra day between the high intensity session on Tuesday and the 5K time trial. So basically, this week is a little bit more running focused because of the hard run and aerobic run. So it's actually a little bit lower volume, but because of the higher impact of running, I think those two things kind of even each other out. So it's about 15 hours of training this week, which is still a decent amount. And that's kind of the max, right? Like that's the most that I'm going to do. And same with the 17 and a half hours the week before. That's the most that I'm going to do. It's probably going to be a little bit less, but I kind of like to plan for the most, and that way I block it out in my schedule. And then if I do a little bit less and have a little bit more time, fantastic. I can do some extra mobility. I can do some extra core, etc., etc. So basically, that's the training plan. It looks a little bit different in Training Peaks because I do have a week where I'm going to Arizona and I will be pretty much just running. I'm going to bike, trying to rent a bike and bike up Mount Lemmon, which will be really, really fun and exciting because that's something that a lot of pro triathletes seem to go out there and do, and so it'll be fun. Obviously, I'm not going to try to compare myself against them because they're really, really, really good at biking, and I'm just really okay at biking. But it'll be fun to go do something that I've seen and heard a lot of other people do and just kind of get that experience of grinding up that really long hill. And just be a fun experience overall. The rest of the time in Arizona, pretty much it's going to be a run-focused week. No high-intensity sessions whatsoever. Just a lot of running and then hiking and stuff. Being able to go out there and explore everything else with my wife. So that'll be that. And then leading into the race, it'll be a little bit less high intensity and kind of switching around. I'll still do a long ride that week, but the long ride will only be 3 hours. And my dad and I are probably going to go scope out the Florida 70.3 bike course. So that's it. That's the training in a nutshell. And I'm excited to see what it looks like and how I'm able to execute that. See, that's the beginning of this crazy year of a ton of races, and I'm sure I'll revisit in 8 weeks or so after the Florida 70.3. I'll revisit and see, okay, now that we've done this and the race went okay or whatever, like how do we adjust for the next 8 week block that has three more 70.3s in it. So Be really exciting. Stay tuned, follow along on Instagram. That's primarily where I'll be posting a lot of how this stuff is going. I'm excited to dive into it, and we'll see where it goes.